For today's video, I'm gonna talk about a couple movies. Mainly, I'm gonna talk about Erik the Viking, which is a movie released by the Monty Python guys. A very good movie, a very thoughtful movie, just like they all are. Very funny movie. And then I have Dazed and Confused. The reason I went back to Dazed and Confused is because this is my 12th episode, and that's 1, 2, right? I already talked about how what the number X represents. It means 10, right? Similarly, which is the 1 and 0. Then we have 1 and 2, which is the unity, and the duality of the universe. So the unity and the duality, that's 1 and 2. In Spanish, it goes by doce. So 12 is called doce. In Hindi, it's bara. In Latin, I believe it's dodec or something, but not really sure about that. So since it's doce in Spanish, that's DC, so I thought Dazed and Confused would be a good movie to talk about, because Dazed and Confused is a very thoughtful movie, very insightful movie. You can study all the different characters in there and all the things they say, a lot of smart little quips in there. So I just wanted to talk about some characters. There's Randy, who's like the main guy who needs an attitude adjustment, and he doesn't like how the school is becoming all authoritarian. And it's funny because there's a scene where the coach tells Randy that he needs an attitude adjustment, but his friends make fun of him because of what his coach said. So he basically changes his internal beliefs, and he becomes more rebellious to fit in with his friends. And basically, that's how young guys are. With peer pressure, they start acting stupider so they can fit in with their friends. And women have the same thing, like where you see the women bullying all the freshman girls. The upperclassmen are bullying the freshman girls. Then there's this girl who's hanging out by the fence, and then the older girl comes to her and she's like, "Hey, what are you doing over there?" And she's like, "No, I'm just checking it out. I'm just hanging out." And she's like, "Are you in? So are you out or are you in? So do you just want to check out or do you want to be part of it?" And she's like, "Oh, I'm in. I want to be part of it." Uh, that shows how women even stronger than men have that desire to belong to the group. And even though she's walking into, by being in, she's going to be treated like a little she's going to be treated like a piece of shit, and degraded by the older girls. But that's, she wants to be in, so she has to deal with it. But that shows you how women bully and how that's different from how men bully younger men. So the women, they're bullying these younger girls by destroying their self-esteem. They're calling them sluts. They're destroying their clothing and their beauty and everything. And they're basically showing them their place. They're showing them that they're below us, the hotter and older girls. So that's what it's about. Well, with the men, it's about like kind of scaring these young guys into respecting them, it seems like, because and also they get to have fun as guys hunting. For them it's like a hunt. The older guys, it's like hunting. Like I said in the previous video, how males have their own drives and females have their own drives in society. So men have that hunting drive of ganging up together and going and acquiring things and prey, usually. So they hunt for these middle school kids who are coming to be freshmen. So for them that's fun. They go around hunting for them, and also in the night they go hunting and destroying property. But it's also an initiation ritual for the boys, because for boys to become men, they have to kind of realize that they're living in a very dangerous world. And until now, because they were raised by women, they were always safe and protected. So so that's what the older guys are doing to the younger guys. They're trying to scare them straight, basically. So it's like an initiation ritual, and the boys have to overcome their fear. But we also see how some women, they try to protect the males that they see as children. They try to protect them, and basically they prevent them from growing and developing further, because we see how his older sister tells the other guys to go easy on him, and this makes the older guys want to hit him harder. And then when they run from the bullies, then finally the bullies catch up to them, and there's no hard feelings at this point between them. The bully actually enjoys that he gave him kind of a chase before he got whooped. But he says that the bully says, "Oh, only gonna let you guys off with 5 this time," or I'm just gonna let you off with 5. But then his mom comes and pulls a shotgun to protect her son. But this later results in him getting beat to the maximum because now he really pisses him off because it's his mother. It's not his fault, but that's how women mess up young guys and their growing up phase. Instead of getting out of the way. So that was fun. And also you get to see how nobody, especially the older man, the black dude who's the teacher, nobody has really had any sympathy for the young guys except for the women in their life who make it worse, basically. So it's basically an initiation ritual shown in that movie. It's a very good movie. And I just kind of looked at the start of it. But another interesting thing in the start is how you see the teacher. She's promoting communism. Her message is totally anti-American. She's degrading the founding fathers and everything. So the communism is being preached while sex and drugs are being running amok in society, especially in the kids. So it's all connected, and it's all shown in that movie. And then also we see how the females, when they leave to the restroom together, and I always wonder, why do they go together? Are they putting makeup on each other's faces or something? But actually, they're going there to plot. They're going in there to talk, to have a female-only space where they can strategize about things they don't like in the class, and the males have no idea this is going on, but the women are doing it very slickly, and yeah, so that's also shown in the movie. So it's a very good movie. I'm going to talk about it later, hopefully, more. But for today, I wanted to go back to the movie called. Not go back, but introduce a movie called Erik the Viking. And this is a great movie because I just talked in the last movie, Clockwork Orange, about rape and violence and how these are natural male drives. The drive for sex and the drive for acquiring sexual objects or new women, conquest, taking that conquest, and also the hunting for loots and spoils of war. And all the violence that comes along with it. It's something young men and men in general in certain societies enjoy, and especially warrior societies enjoy. So all of that is shown brilliantly in the movie Erik the Viking. Now, Erik the Viking is more like a tribal. I also talk about that movie because it's more about that tribal gender roles, and the tribal forces are seen very clearly, because they're not living in the order of the money as we are. They're living in the previous order, the order of the force. Now, the Vikings were there to conquer a large part of Europe and bring it under the same kind of civilization. So, because the rest of Europe was more barbaric, it was more down to earth, grassroots, tribal kind of living. Visigoths and all those tribes. So, these Vikings were basically the order of the force. This violent thug life kind of cult, or kind of like a crusader type of a group, that was basically all about war and rape and plunder and booty and stuff, taking over. So that's why I talked about that movie, because those themes of violence and sex and social forces, tribal forces, are shown very beautifully. So let's get started with the first part. The first part is the most important character in this movie is Erik, obviously. He's the son of the tribal chief, the big warlord of the group, and that's his grandfather. His dad is already dead because his dad was a big macho man, had a lot of bravado, and died early. And this is common in this cult because their religion is a death worship kind of religion. They believe like if they die, kind of like the jihadi Muslims, they believe if they die in battle, then they'll go to heaven and they'll live with the gods in Valhalla. And if they die of natural old age, then they will just go to hell. So it's all about fighting. It's all about that male young man spirit of conquering and proving yourself and winning things and showing your bravado and so forth. So in the first scene, we see how Erik is not like everybody else because he's like this Hamlet guy, right? I talked about Hamlet, and he's like a different. He's like in the priest class. He's like in the king's class, but he doesn't agree to the same philosophy as everybody else does. So for him, rape is kind of crude, and he doesn't really enjoy it because he likes to there be love and some kind of attachment between the people instead of just going in there and taking what you can and running out. So because of this, so it's a very funny scene. You get to see. The important thing about that scene is that he kills that girl who he starts to develop an interest for, and he kills her by accident, and her ghost follows him throughout the movie because she raises a very important point, is that if you think raping is crude, why do you think all this violence and war is not crude? Why is this violence and loot and robbery and destruction of everyone's home not equally crude? And he doesn't want to accept that because that core philosophy is the core philosophy of their religion, and then he's going to be like Hamlet, against the world. So the first scene is beautiful because he kills that woman, and then that sacred feminine, the the man with a conscience awakened. That's the sacred feminine. So the X-Man is basically the male and the female, the 10, the male and the female in balance. So that woman basically is the female, the half that completes him, basically. So she's like the sacred feminine, and she follows him, and he sees her at different instances where he sees that where his conscience and his emotion starts to move in a positive way. So that's the interesting thing about that woman. Then we have the second scene where his conscience and that woman is in his mind and holding him down because he sees all the vulgar behavior of his fellow males who are all drunk and full of idiotic, callous behavior. So he starts talking to his grandpa, sharing his inner thoughts. But then he finds out his grandpa doesn't understand where he's coming from because his grandpa is like the originator of this stupid nonsense, where killing is great and we don't have to think about anything beyond, anything deeper. So frustrated with all this, he goes out into the wilderness and seeks out this prophetess, this old lady who lives. She's like the Elijah figure of the Bible. She's out there chanting like. It's a dark age and it's a bad time, and we're all doomed, basically. So he goes out to see Freya, and then she explains to him what's going on, that we are in the age of transition, we are in the age of Ragnarok, where the wolf, the evil force of trickery and deception, the wolf has swallowed the sun being the Jesus Christ, the God, the Father, the Father of Jesus Christ. He's the Son of God, right? Or Jesus is the Son because he gives us light, he gives us knowledge, he gives us enlightenment. He helps us do things in the world. For real, for real, for real. So the wolf already has swallowed the sun in this axe age, and the sword age, and the storm age. There's a great winter. The age is called the age of the great winter, or Ragnarok, and this is where brother destroys brother, and there's wars until the earth is completely destroyed. So that's exactly what the Bible talks about in the end times, the same exact thing. So this is the time where we're living in, and this is the time where this Erik the Viking is also, in this fictional story, is also living in. So it's a very beautiful movie based on these themes that I've shown you. Now, in that scene, we see there's a fight, in the next scene, there's a fight between the brutal, I call him the brutal dude, and then the Berserk Junior, the young Berserk dude. and these represent like this, not the X-Man like Hamlet or like Eric, but the people in the split consciousness. So there's some people in the patriarchal left brain male only consciousness, and there are some people in the, even though they're men, in the feminine side of the male only consciousness, but not in the masculine consciousness. Whereas Eric is the combined, the synthesis. So there's a duality and there's an Eric. So there's a brutal dude and then there's a berserk dude, and they're fighting. And this is interesting because when they disagree on something, two guys in this kind of cult philosophy, if two males disagree on something, the only solution is to fight it out. So the winner gets to win, and his philosophy is supreme. That's how it works in these kind of little boys groups. So Eric says, "Hey, it doesn't have to be this way that you have to kill each other to prove it right. Why don't we just find out what is right by doing the unimaginable, by crossing the rainbow bridge and going to the gods? Because Freya has already told him he can go find that horn, and he can blow that horn. He has to go to High Brazil to get the horn, but once he gets that horn, he can blow it 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, and do certain things, and free the world from this age of Ragnarok, basically." So that's an interesting little thing. There's also the counterpoint of the Christian and the atheist. There's a priest guy who always holds his Bible. He's always preaching, but nobody wants to listen to him. So he's kind of a loner guy. But he seems like a joke to the whole tribe. But we see how important he is because he's the only one. He's like the wild card factor who leads Eric's plan to success, because he has the power of God with him, and he crushes the enemies, and he goes through places where other people can't go through. So it's real, and sees things or can do things that other people don't do because they're not in that mindset. So the Christian and the atheist has an interesting little talk too, back and forth. And Eric and the brutal guy also have some disagreements, but basically Eric tells him that you have to follow me now, So because the brutal dude doesn't like it, he's all about the might is right, So the atheist says one interesting thing to the Christian, and he's like, yeah, I don't believe in that Buddhist mumbo jumbo, and the Christian is like, hey, this is not Buddhism, this is Christianity, and the atheist like, the same thing, ain't it? And that's very true, right? The Christian, the atheist always has that red pill perspective, and the Christian has that book smart kind of perspective, not the street smart perspective. But they're both kind of not free thinking like Eric, because Eric doesn't have those constraints, so he can take them further. Another interesting thing is the dad versus son conflict between the berserks. Now the berserk is, like I said, the guy who's in the right brain only, so he's more of a masochist, not a sadist like the brutal guy. So he has to take a lot of crap from his dad, because his dad is always putting him down and always trying to be the dad and treating him like a little boy. And he hates this, And so while they're going to war and they're preparing for war, and going to the battle, he just finally goes berserk right there in the middle of the community. And his dad is like, oh my God, my stupid son, he'll never get it. You never go berserk before the war. And we also see how the women folk in the tribe, they're all scared by the violence that they see with the berserk. And then when Eric starts talking about what they'll face in the future, they start getting all crazy and they don't want the men to leave. And this is because this is the order of the force. This is still not a natural tribal society. In a natural tribal society, like I said, the woman would face the natural, the occasional or rare attack from the neighboring tribes who they're beefing with, And some of them might even get raped in this process. But these women never see violence like that because they have their own strong points, and these are the conquerors of the world, basically, the known world, So when they start hearing about the violence, then they start freaking out, And then the grandpa tells Eric, hey, you're being stupid. This is not how you talk in front of women. But Eric just normal, he's just being honest, He's not really so much in their cult of these beliefs. Yeah, so at this point, I want to go back because I just remember something. So at Dazed and Confused, right? I talked about in the previous video about the different MGTOW guys in there. So how there's the guy with the mustache, the older guy, and then there's the pothead guy, the one with the leaf. He smokes and say F all hoes, you know, and he talks some things about MGTOW philosophy too. But another great guy who talks about MGTOW philosophy is that nerd guy, the guy who hangs out with that guy with the glasses and the female. They're in the chess club or something, and he also has some interesting MGTOW philosophy, and he's kind of like Alex. He's like the Jesus figure in this movie, I think, in Dazed and Confused, because he doesn't go with any of those groups of jocks like Randy does, or he doesn't go with like the stoners like the other everybody else associates with, you know, Randy including. He kind of keeps with his own little best friend and the girl who hangs out with them. You know, that's his circle. So an interesting scene where he gets crucified is where in the party, this MGTOW guy, he makes this comment to his other friend. He's like, "Oh, look at them guys! Those guys, they're smoking up right now." And then now those guys who were smoking up, there were some. One of them was this thug guy. You know, he's like the brutal dude in this movie. Dazed and Confused and Erik the Viking, both you should study all these different characters. That's why I'm making such a point to talk about these different characters, because these characters reveal different personality types in human consciousness, you know, and reveal more about human nature, which is the point of this whole PMS series, or PM movies on sex series. So that guy makes a comment, you know, just like Jesus, he just speaks the truth, right? But then there's Pharisees who don't like the truth, and then they accuse him of other things which he didn't really do, and they persecute him for it. Same thing with this guy. He makes a simple comment, "Oh, they're smoking up," and this guy takes offense to it because I guess he's tired of being judged for being a stoner, uh, which is his own fault. But he takes it out on this poor guy, you know. And this guy just walks away. But then when he walks away, he feels like he should have stood up for himself. He didn't really stand up because he didn't do anything wrong. And instead of being defensive, he should have been more offensive. So just not doing anything about it drives him nuts. And then he goes back and punches him out, you know. And his logic is, which sounds logic to people who have conscience and people who have some emotion, especially when you're younger and you don't realize how everybody around you is. So he thinks that, you know, I'm in the right. I didn't do anything wrong. I'm just going to punch him and get my revenge. And if he tries to beat me up too bad, then other people are definitely going to save me. So he goes in there and tries to defend himself, but he doesn't realize. Everybody just cheers him on, just like Jesus, you know. The king, Pontius Pilate, gives the people an option to save Jesus at the end instead of having him crucified. But the priests manipulate the people, and the people tell him to kill him, and they save a mass murderer, somebody who's known as a murderer instead. So that's what happened in this scene too. So I thought that was a nice parallel that I forgot to mention earlier. So let's get back to the Erik the Viking. How the women go crazy, but then finally they leave. They leave, and the women have to let go. But during this time, there's another stuff going on behind the scenes. There's a certain brotherhood going around, a blacksmith. There's a blacksmith's code, and there's an assistant to the blacksmith who's like a little Satan whispering into Eve. And this kind of represents the Masons, you know, the Freemasons and all the secret societies and brotherhoods, because they think that they're good because they're just upholding this code to keep themselves moral and righteous, but they're easily manipulated because of grip consciousness into the base form of selfishness, which is fighting for your rights. So they get manipulated because they start thinking, oh, we have to protect our rights. We have to protect our rights. Instead of, you know, protecting the weak people in your society and their rights, they think about our rights, and we have to protect our rights. And that's where Satan manipulates them. And that's how his assistant tells him, oh, this age of Ragnarok is really good for our business, and if it ends, then we're all gonna be poor again. So we don't want that, do we? So he also, oh wow, so that selfishness shows the dark side of human nature, that Judas Iscariot, that is also shown with those guys. So that guy goes to the big bad guy, the Halfland, the Black. Now this is like the big Saturn, the big like the Jehovah figure of the Bible. The big jealous Lord, who has no other gods before me, and he is all about violence. He's all about misrule. So Saturn represents misrule. The age of transition, the age of Ragnarok, the age of Kali. It's where the bad people take over, basically, and the old system, it gets destroyed, and it's all lawlessness and might is right and all that stuff. So Halfland the Black, who's a real psychopath, sociopath, sadomasochistic overlord. Now he gets scared because his good time might come to an end because of Erik and his group. So now he starts worrying about other things instead of just oppressing the poor. And so we see how this dark side is in every group. And there's a master dark side who they're all kind of connected to, and they can always get help from in the world we live in. So these guys, they go off on their journey. And it's interesting that the priest is always there. He's not connected to the rest of them. He's like, what are you guys seeing? I don't see any dragon. I don't see no fake sun, So the Bible protects him from all the delusion of the dragon, is basically the message of this movie, I think. Even though they kind of show him in a very humble and very almost ridiculous way. But it's also interesting how much power he has, because everybody else is scared of the dragon, but he just holds it in his hand. It's like, look at this toy. You guys are scared of this stupid little rubber toy? And he just throws it away, and then it comes to life and scares everybody else. So that's also interesting. But the priest is bewildered by this. He's like inactive in this situation, whereas Erik, he's actually able to get everybody moving. And he actually goes in and uses strategy to defeat the dragon, because the dragon is of darkness and deception, using strategy to confuse the mind. So he uses intellect and reason and cunning to overpower this master of cunning. And he can't do it alone, because then the berserk comes alive at this point, and the young berserk comes alive, and he just goes crazy on the dragon and distracts the dragon, and then hurts the dragon, and then Erik's plan succeeds. So it's interesting how every single person, however silly and crazy they seem, have very, very, the crazier they seem, the more important they are in this story, the more important a player they are in this story. So that's very interesting too. And there's many things I didn't understand, like Leaf the Lucky and all that stuff. There was some deeper stuff going on there, but maybe if someone understands that history better, they'll understand it. All right, so the interesting thing is High Brazil. So Brazil is known as one of the most male-friendly countries in this in this whole Earth, in this whole planet Earth, or at least on this Western Hemisphere. So that whole story of their journey into High Brazil to find that horn that will save everybody is also very interesting. And when we see in High Brazil, we see the contrast between a patriarchal, cold climate culture of these males versus this matriarchy of in a hot climate. The complete opposite of the cold masculine is a warm and hospitable female society. So that contrast is very interesting. We see how they all come in with spears, guarded to the limit. But this naked, almost naked, harmless young woman leaves them all confused and defenseless and totally overpowered. So that's the interesting scene too. And their first interaction is also very insightful, with female nature and male nature, and cold climate versus hot climate, freedom versus this matriarchal security that we live in today. And it's interesting because this matriarchy is basically like a matriarchy. Even the leader looks like a female. He's a man, but he dresses up like a female, and the whole culture is very feminine. You know, everybody is friends on High Brazil. If you're so welcoming, welcome. And that's what they say, you know? Whereas these guys have their swords up. I was like, who are you? So, there's religion. There's a religion here too, which is interesting. Now, their religion is just a very crude, young boy, masculine kind of religion, right? Very undefined, very scattered. But they have a very kind of more defined religion. You see, there's this faith that the gods saved this, made this area special. But once human blood is spilled here for the first time, then everything will sink. So that's like their religion, sort of. And no violence is allowed, but then there's lots of sex and promiscuity. So that's also a very interesting feminine culture kind of society. And their music sucks because it has no like spirit, you know, because they're all like little girls sitting around in a I don't know, in a classroom all day. So that is very interesting. The contrast between the two cultures. A lot to be thought about there. The next scene we see them having sex, the man and the woman, and the male versus female sexuality is revealed there very beautifully. We see how for women sex is not special, and for men love is not special because they fall in love with so many, and women can have sex with so many that it's not special. You know, and for them that one, the feeling of the one is special, but for men, the feeling, the actual physical feeling is special. So that was so great. And he gets instantly suspicious when he hears her talking like sex is not important, because he's like, he gets a little disgusted. It's like, how many guys have you already had sex with? And then he finds out that he's the fifth one this week from her dad, you know. And her dad is interesting because there's this trickery, this cloth that she uses to cover her men with, and then they become invisible to her dad, but only her dad. This cloth doesn't work on anybody except for the priest. So it's just something that her mom has taught her to how to fool her dad. So that's interesting how women study different men and use trade tactics on how to control these men to their daughters, and mothers teach their daughters all this trickery arts, you know. That's also another interesting thing I saw from that scene. But that clause is beautiful because later it's like a religious voodoo kind of curse, because the priest also cannot, it also works on the priest, and also gives Erik this fake confidence when he goes into battle. Even though everybody sees him, they just, because of this fake confidence that he's gotten from this girl's little spell, he uses it to basically give himself an advantage in war. And that's also very interesting right there. Magic dishcloth. That's what the atheist calls it. It's a magic dishcloth. It makes her look so clean to the world, or to her dad, you know. But Tarpan the Black is interesting because we see how that brute, you know, the brutal guy, the brutal dude, that dude is also for the first time notices fear, because the Berserk knows why. Is because it's magic. And Tarpan the Black uses magic, you know. He has some certain magical dark arts which he can take over your minds with and make you impotent. And another important, great, funny scene is how there's a Japanese guy whipping all the white people as slaves, which is like the backwards of how Americans used to do with the Chinese, who were their slaves in like 50 years ago, you know. So the whole culture reversal is an interesting scene right there too. And then we see how Loki is working on the side of the black, Tarpan the Black, and we also see how in the war Tarpan escapes. These psychopathic families of leaders, they always manage to get away in every fucking apocalypse that they get started, you know. So they go back to fight and oppress people another day, and then okay. So the next scene, what happens is that there's a conflict with Loki and Kettle the blacksmith, and they want to get rid of the girl, I think, or no, they want to get rid of that horn, you know, because they don't want the Age of Ragnarok to end. but in the process they spill blood, and the whole society starts sinking. And the girl sees what happens, so she warns everybody. But the king, he goes in denial mode. And this is like one of the this is what I talked about earlier, the 7 stages of loss, or the 5 stages of loss in the Kubler-Ross cycle or whatever. The first stage is denial. So when you lose something, you first want to deny it. You go into shock, you have a heart attack, you want to say, oh, it's not happening, or you want to claim that something else happened. You know, those all things happen. So that's what these guys do. He starts chanting that, oh, nothing's happening, while everything is sinking right in front of them, you know. And some people join him. And then Erik comes in and he's like, hey, save yourselves. We're drowning, you know. Don't be in denial. You have to, you know, get yourselves out of the situation. And most people just laugh it off. But some people join Erik and they get saved because they get that boat. But even to the last minute, until they sink, the king and all his followers, the people who are still on denialists, they still stay put. They're like, nothing's happening, and they just drown, even though they could just get on the boat right next to them. So that's the interesting human psychology about the end times and what happens to large groups of insane people who want to stay insane when reality is right in front of their face, and their way out is right in front of their face too. So that's something to think about in group consciousness. Okay, so and then in this, another thing that's happening while they're drowning is interesting, is this Loki guy. Loki is the same psychopathic personality, right? Who's part of their group. So Loki starts freaking out, man. He's like, oh, I'm gonna die, and he just starts freaking out and taking down everybody around him, you know, because he's just out of control. Because that's their greatest fear, is the fear of losing anything physical. So Loki starts drowning people around him, and then the only guy who can do anything in this situation is the priest. Another thing where the priest becomes the only one who's powerful, and priest just punches him in the face, and he just passes out, and everything's cool again. So that's a great scene right there, I thought. So next, what happens? Yeah, the priest is always, whenever there's these crisis moments, the priest always refers to the Bible. He's like, dude, it's all right here, man. It's all right here. And everyone's like, shut up, you know. But sometimes he gets too much in the book and he doesn't act too. So he needs to be told shut up sometimes in order to act right as per the current situation, instead of reflecting. And then there's a father and son conflict again. Because he doesn't let him do anything. But the girl saves the day again. She has the extra piece of the horn that Loki tries to hide away. So it's funny, even though the girl seems like, you know, like today in the MGTOW, some people try to make women seem like they're just totally worthless. But you know, they have certain things that if you study the things that this girl does throughout the movie, even though she's a very passive figure and doesn't do anything active by herself, women are not always passive just to destroy men. They can also be passive and help men, which is what we see in this movie. So that's also another interesting little balanced kind of viewpoint about gender roles and gender relations. And another thing some women have warned me about, but the man in me doesn't want to listen, that she warns Erik, and that's how they win, basically, is she tells him not to look at the edge, when they're crossing the edge of the world, she tells him, don't look, like everybody else is looking, don't look. And he's like, no, I want to look, but she's like, don't you love me, don't you love me? If you love me, then listen to me and let's just do this and get it over with. So he submits, you know, and they kind of move through the next level. And that's kind of interesting because, like, it's kind of like that scene from That They Live, where that black dude, he's looking out the window with his They Live glasses, and the white dude warns him. He's like, hey, don't look out those glasses too long, because it starts to feel like a knife into your skull, you know. So she wants him to preserve his strength and not look at all that and dwell into that stuff. So that's also an interesting little thing about learning too much and going too deep into certain things. because it can kind of make you very weak. So another interesting thing is how when they see the gods are all little boys, you know? The gods, you know, the people who rule the world, they're all just little boys mentally. And they're just very knowledgeable about human nature, you know? And they laugh at Erik, just like Freya laughs at Erik. He's like, you know, you don't realize that humans are humans. They're going to do what they want to do, and they're not all perfect like you might imagine them to be, you know? If Henrietta the wolf didn't swallow the sun, there would still be crime, and there would still be brother attacking brothers. So don't think we're the only ones who can save you. Is what he's trying to say. But we also see how the lady, you know, the young girl, she motivates the priest because the priest is the only one who's impervious to the gods. So he's the only one who can save the day. So she gets the priest to go and save the day, basically, and he does save the day, you know. He saves the day, and then he gets everybody back to their home. And when they get home, now that they've gone through to the gods, through all the different, to the edge of the world and back, now they've died, and now they've come back to life. And now they see the reality for what it is that Tarpon the Black, you know, the evil Jehovah, Satan figure, the king of the world, basically, has all of their family people back home hostage. And they're all basically shackled, their mouths covered, their hands tied, and they're all like under control of Tarpon the Black. And that's what Jesus basically said. I have not come to bring peace, but a sword. I've come to bring the sword to divide brother against brother, man against wife, because you don't realize that there's a war going on right while you're sitting, you know, and living your everyday life. There's a good versus war, and your own family members, your own peers are, you know, on one side or the other. So, and unfortunately, the other side has 99% of the people on their side. So when he comes back, he sees what's really going on, and these people are all scared as fuck, and you know, they eventually give up their weapons because they don't want everybody to die. They had their humanity is used against them to basically to advance evil's agenda forward. But there's always a wildcat factor. God is still alive because the priest comes in with his big boat, not knowing what he's doing, completely impervious to what's going on, because he doesn't even believe in all this stuff, you know, the edge of the world and all that. But still, he comes in with with the power of God, and he crushes the black and everyone. And then finally, the sun comes out, and knowledge returns, and you know, goodness returns, and the God returns to society. Basically, is what they're saying. So it was a beautiful movie. One of my favorite movies. I mean, Monty Python always brings something that will educate and elevate. So hopefully you liked something. It was a long video, but I think I put a lot in there too. You know, if you appreciate what I'm bringing, you know, you could provide some support. At the very least, just give a like or subscribe to my channel or share the link. All right, see you later. Peace.